Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. A potential major development just revealed by House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer. For years, the president, Democrats, and even some Republicans have claimed there's no direct evidence showing Joe Biden himself ever benefiting from his son's overseas business deals, right? We've heard that so many times. There's no smoking gun. There's no direct evidence tying him. Where's the money? Where's the money? But Chairman Comer, using subpoenaed bank records, has for the first time clearly laid out exactly how money from a Chinese company Hunter was doing business with was moved from bank account to bank account, in other words, laundered, to eventually end up in the personal account of Joe Biden in 2017. Now the money was apparently, they said, a loan repayment. That's probably not true, but it also is irrelevant. Comer saying it doesn't matter because the point is Chinese money went directly, well, indirectly, but into Joe Biden's account. And while the family members can say, oh, I swear I was just repaying my brother for a loan, it doesn't matter. I mean, honestly, this is why people are asking, why didn't he crack down on the weird balloons flying over the United States? Why has he been such a kowtower to China? Is it because they have something on the guy? It's a fair question to ask. Not accusing the president yet, but I'm concerned about what I just saw on this money trail. And we're going to get to it in a minute. At the same time, President Biden making major headlines with statements he made last night is a rambling slew of statements regarding Israel's response to the Hamas terror attacks. No one seeming to understand exactly what the hell he meant by any of what he said. Just perfect during an international crisis. I'm actually surprised they haven't had any clarifying statements on it yet. They probably will soon. It happened last night during a fundraising event in Minneapolis. A protester stood up in the middle of his remarks and interrupted him. Watch.
When I heard that, I knew Mr. President, if you care about Jewish people, as a rabbi, I need you to call for a ceasefire right now.
Okay. So that was not just any old protester. That was, quote, Rabbi Jessica Rosenberg. Jessica is a man pretending to be a woman. And I don't know if she's pretending to be a rabbi too, but she barely tries to hide the fact that she's a man. She sports a beard. She's a bearded lady reconstructionist rabbi. That's a thing, right? To my Jewish friends. I'm sorry, we need to laugh. We have to, right? Can you imagine showing up at your synagogue and seeing that? The bearded lady up there? Instead of telling Jessica to sit down and shut up like the rest of the audience appropriately did, the president decided to answer. So Jessica wound up making news. According to Pool reports, the president said he thinks there needs to be a pause to get the, quote, prisoners out. Okay, so they're hostages. There is a difference. Prisoners implies they did something wrong. And said, quote, I'm the guy that convinced Bibi to call for a ceasefire. Wait, what? Words have meaning, especially when they come from a president. What did he mean exactly by using the word ceasefire? To most people, a ceasefire means an end to the fighting, and in this case, a win for Hamas. It's what Rashida Tlaib has been demanding. What, did that actually happen? When? What happened? Just this week, a leader of Hamas said in an interview, the terror group will repeat the October 7th attack over and over and over until Israel is annihilated. Now, this is very important. This is an important soundbite we're about to play for you. You may have heard it elsewhere yesterday when it hit, because so many people who want a ceasefire like to ignore that this is Hamas's plan. So many people who are blaming Israel right now and demanding, live in peace. How'd that work out? They lived in peace on October 6th. Live in peace, two-state solution, we've got to get together. How have they considered what Hamas says its own plans are? We voiced over his comments so you can actually hear them in English.
Israel is a country that has no place on our land. We must remove that country because it constitutes a security, military, and political catastrophe to the Arab and Islamic nation, and it must be finished. We are not ashamed to say this with full force. We must teach Israel a lesson, and we will do this again and again. The Al-Aqsa flood is the first time, and there will be a second, a third, a fourth, because we have the determination, the resolve, and the capabilities to fight. Will we have to pay a price? Yes, and we are ready to pay it. We are called a nation of martyrs, and we are proud to sacrifice martyrs. The occupation must come to an end.
Occupation where? In the Gaza Strip?
No, I'm talking about all the Palestinian lands.
Does that mean the annihilation of Israel?
Yes, of course. On October 7th, October 10th, October 1 million, everything we do is justified.
Okay, so maybe we should just sit and chat at the negotiation table and we can come up with a lovely two-state solution in which, wait, who are they kidding? Who are they kidding? It's not a ceasefire for Hamas, and it never will be. The president's comments come at a time when he's facing growing pressure from progressives within the Democratic Party. When he was in Minneapolis last night at that event we just showed you, anti-Israel protesters took to the streets with signs like Genocide Joe and Abandon Biden. No more votes, ceasefire now. They also chanted for the, quote, occupation to end.
Occupation! Bombing civilians! Bombing civilians! Shut it down! Genocide! Shut it down! Genocide! Shut it down!
Joining me now, Tom Bevan. He's the co-founder and president of one of my very favorite sites on the internet since I got into news, Real Clear Politics. Go there every morning, realclearpolitics.com to check my news. I recommend it to you as well. And Josh Holmes of the Ruthless podcast. Hey, subscribe to the show on YouTube and follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This show is supported by Grand Canyon University. Founded in 1949, GCU is a private Christian university that's dedicated to delivering an affordable and transformative higher education. Their vibrant campus is located in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, and according to niche.com, ranked a top 25 best campus in the country. As of June 2023, GCU offers 330 academic programs with over 270 of them online, allowing you the freedom to earn your degree on your time from wherever you are. At GCU, your degree, whether it's a bachelor's, master's, or doctorate, integrates the free market system and a welcoming Christian worldview. Learn more about GCU's programs, competitive tuition rates, and scholarship offers from your university counselor. They're part of the supportive graduation team who take a personalized approach to helping you achieve your academic goals, walking alongside you every step of the way. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. For more information or to enroll, visit gcu.edu. Gentlemen, great to have you here today. So I don't know what happened in that blurb of words that came out of the President of the United States' mouth last night while he was talking to Jessica, the bearded lady rabbi. So she made news. He made news. I don't know what Jessica confuses me. And you tell me, I'll start with you on this, Holmes, whether somebody from the White House should come out and clarify whether we have demanded a ceasefire and we learned it from Jessica, the bearded rabbi. Is that U.S. policy now? Maybe a clarification is in order.
Yeah, I mean, look, the bearded lady got herself in, or himself, or whomever the bearded lady is, in the news on this one. Look, he's so imprecise with his words. It's anybody's guess what it is that he's talking about. My sense is what he's probably referring to was that lag between the October 7 attack and ultimately when Israel started the offensive in Gaza. I assume that's what it is, but that's certainly not what he said there. And like, again, this is part of the problem that you have with Joe Biden and this entire administration is that they can't actually articulate what they're doing, what their goals are, what they're trying to do. And it just fuels all this speculation. It fuels all kinds of doubt. And the message it sends to the international community has got to be horrifying to some of our allies. What does he mean? I don't know. It doesn't. The busiest person at the White House, honestly, is what we call in the Ruthless Variety program, bracket man. Bracket man is the person who has to go back through all of the transcripts when you're typing up what it is that the president is saying on a day-to-day basis, and they go back and put brackets around what he really meant rather than what he actually said. Bracket man is just like overtime right now.
most secure job you can get at the White House right now. Absolutely most secure. You're never, ever getting fired. You know, Tom, he went on to say, I'm the guy that talked to Sisi, al-Sisi of Egypt, to convince him to open the door. Is the door open in Egypt? Because as far as I know, all they've taken is like a couple severely wounded people. And that's about it. The door's not open. It's been a national news story since October 7th that they will not open the door. So when did that happen? I'm just not sure we can put any stock in what the president of the United States is saying, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with Josh. I mean, look, what the administration is facing right now is they are getting intense pressure from their left wing on all this. You played the clips of the protesters, right? And so what does the administration do? They're trying to thread the needle here. Biden has been standing strong with Israel initially, but sort of, what did they do yesterday? They put out, Kamala Harris announces the first ever White House strategic initiative to combat Islamophobia.
Yeah.
Interesting timing for that. Why would they be doing that now? If not,
wait,
to
hold
try
that
and
thought.
placate those
Hold
folks
that thought.
on the left.
I want to let you finish it, but I want to show the audience what you're talking about. It was unbelievable. They dropped this late last night. Here she is.
And today, we take another important step forward in our fight against hate. For years, Muslims in America and those perceived to be Muslim have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks. As a result of the Hamas terrorist attack in Israel and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, we have seen an uptick in anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, anti-Semitic, and Islamophobic incidents across America, including the brutal attack of a Palestinian-American woman who was Muslim and the killing of her 6-year-old son.
Go ahead, Tom.
I mean, look, you've got Jewish students that are getting chased all over campuses, having to lock themselves in libraries. I mean, it's crazy what's going on. And the administration chooses to highlight Islamophobia and hate crimes against Muslims. The attack that she mentioned happened here in Chicago. It was a completely deranged lunatic, a singular event. And yet that's what she's highlighting here. I mean, it just, look, again, I think it speaks to the political pressure that they're under, particularly, and there were a couple stories on this today, which we posted at RealClearPolitics, that the administration and his political advisors are deathly afraid that they have put Michigan in play, and that Muslims, particularly in the Detroit suburbs, right, Dearborn, that if they don't turn out, that state is going to be close enough that could actually tip the balance.
Wow. Trump, we were talking about this the other day. Trump won Michigan in 2016. He won Michigan in 2016. So
That's right.
It's gettable. And not to presume that it's going to be Trump, but certainly looking at it. We'll get to that in a minute.
Megyn, can I pause you on that? Just imagine for a second, as a part of your constituency, you're talking about a population that's out chanting from the river to the sea. They're talking about the elimination of Jewish people. They're talking about the elimination of Israel. To be politically sensitive to that is wild to me. I mean, in any other context about a population of people, whether it's racial or religious or what have you, there would be an outcry across this country. But yet somehow we watch all of these protests, and what they're calling for, let's be clear, this is not like two-state solution. They're calling for the elimination of the state of Israel and the eradication, as they say, of Jews. I mean, this is not a constituency that has to be appealed to. This is extremely radical, totally inappropriate bunch of folks that we should not have as a part of the political system at this point.
Well, and just not to put too fine a point on it, I mean, Joe Biden is the one who declared his candidacy. He was running to save the soul of America after Charlottesville. You had a couple hundred neo-Nazis show up there, and that was the rationale for his entire campaign. And now he's running for re-election, but can't seem to denounce what's going on. I mean, it's crazy.
Oh, remember the nonstop news stories about Trump? Do you denounce David Duke? Right? He was forced to say it like, whatever. He's like, I denounce. Okay, I denounce. Just because this one KKK, whatever, white nationalist decided Trump was his guy, that was a news story for a week and beyond. It kept going. But now you've got all these people who don't want to vote for Joe Biden in Michigan because He's defending our closest ally in the Middle East, who just was subjected to the worst terror attack since the Holocaust. It killed more Americans, the worst since September 11th. And that's a problem, but he doesn't have to denounce anybody. By the way, they're now saying that neo-Nazis are showing up at some of these Free Palestine rallies because they all have the same cause. Yes, just like the Hamas guy said. So eliminate Israel? Yes, right on. Double thumbs up. You got it. We're on the right path. They say it explicitly. Here's, check this out. It was a Free Palestine rally. We think it was outside of New York in SOT 6.
I'm a Jew going undercover at a Free Palestine rally to see what they're really about.
Hey, how would you describe a Jew?
They're devils.
Who's at fault?
The Jews. The Jews. Always been a problem.
So if they do take Palestine, where do the 12 million Jews go?
Go to hell. Yeah, that's the literal slogan.
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Okay, if we free Palestine, where do the Jews go?
Hey, go back to Brooklyn, bitch! Shout out to Kanye. He was right.
How do I know that you are...
That I'm not a Jew?
Get the fuck out of my face! Get out of my face!
The Hamas group, the action they've taken, it's not a terrorist attack.
I am queer for Palestine, yes.
What do you think about the argument when people are saying in Gaza they kill gay people?
It's very unsafe to be queer here, too.
But they're not actually killing gay people for being gay by law, right? The way it is in Gaza?
But why do we keep going back to, Gaza?
Why is there such a basis for them to have a homeland? Nobody else has a homeland.
Where are you from, if you don't mind me asking?
My family's from Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan, by the way, so that's a Muslim country, right?
Predominantly, yes.
So would you consider that your homeland?
Yes, so I guess I do have a claim over that, but you can't claim Israel.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, now just FYI, I want to give credit where it's due. That's from the account, I think, on social media from a guy named F. Jerry. He spells out the F word, however. How today I'm trying not to swear.
Look at you.
F. Jerry.
Look at you.
I know. Well, it's only 15 after the hour, Holmes. Anything could happen in the next 2 hours. So in any event, you see, where's the denounce? Of course not. And that, Tom, to your point is, those people, their support for Joe Biden is likely dwindling right now.
Yeah. I mean, look, it is the fact that they have to devise a plan to try and keep folks like that from staying home and not voting for him. Again, in a swing state like Michigan, the fact that they're actively trying to placate those folks with talking about Islamophobia in this kind of environment, look, it's not great. It's not great for the Democratic Party, and it's not great for Biden himself. And we've seen him try, and again, he did stand strong with Israel. I think he deserves credit for that in the moments after October 7th, but has been, particularly over the last few days, trying to sort of walk things back and thread a needle that that he really shouldn't be trying to thread if he truly was concerned about hate in this country and saving the soul of the country and all that stuff that he said that's why the rationale for his running.
Holmes, the immediate shift to Islamophobia is infuriating. It's infuriating. It's so false. And for her to do what the president did last week, which is to, both sides it, worst terrorist attack on Israel since the Holocaust, 1,400 people dead, children tortured in front of their families and so on. And then there was that one child in Chicago. That was terrible. But yeah, that's not the same. Deranged lunatic in Chicago does something awful versus the planned intentional massacre of 1,400 Israelis, not to mention the thousands injured. They keep doing this. And now this whole White House task force, and I don't know how she's describing it, on Islamophobia, it's like our friend Gad Saad put it out yesterday. According to the FBI director, who just testified this week, Jews make up 2.4% of the U.S. population, but are the targets of 60% of the hate crimes, which, by the way, Christopher Wray said is rising, a number rising at a stunning rate. He goes on, that's why it's apparently important to fight Islamophobia. What?
First of all, there's not two sides to this argument. There's just not. There is nobody who is calling for the eradication of the Palestinian people. There is a call to try to take Hamas out entirely, absolutely and entirely. And if you want to get sophisticated about it, that goes for probably Hezbollah and Iranian actors as well. But the thing that has been the most unsettling to me about all of this, Megyn, is the latent anti-Semitism that has been taking root in this country, not to mention across the world. that you just don't know about until moments like this. And can you imagine just for a moment that we had rallies and protests by the thousand in cities across this country of white supremacists that were calling for the death of, African Americans, for example? We would have a task force in this federal government, the likes of which nobody's ever seen, to try to figure out how to reverse that immediately, nip it in the bud, and make a societal change. Not only is that not happening here, they're trying to actively figure out how to placate to this constituency. How is it that we can ensure that we can keep them as a part of the Democratic Party? What an unbelievable outrage. I don't have any words to express how out of body that makes your average American feel when everybody that I know of post George Floyd in 2020 was trying to figure out, are we really a racist country? And people did a lot of introspection about that. And I think, if anything, that whole episode proved that, in fact, we are not a racist country. What I didn't know, but now know, is that there's a huge amount of anti-Semitism in this country that is not only discouraged, it seems to be placated. And that makes me sick to my stomach.
Tom, remember, it wasn't so long ago that Charlie Crist, when he was running for governor down in Florida, and definitely Andrew Cuomo, and I think maybe also Kathy Hochul, who succeeded him, both said comments, all three said comments to the effect of, if you're a Republican, I don't want your vote. Go home. If you don't stand with me on things like gun rights, get out of here. I don't want your vote. So those Democrats could come up with that sort of ire for people who are just Republican. But for these people, F Israel, kill the Jews, Israel has no right to exist. It's fine, as long as you show up if you live in a swing state. We don't really care if you're in Alabama, but we definitely care if you live in Michigan. I mean, it's so cynical. But you're right, like the moderation in his tone and his language, it's got to be politically driven.
Well, I think there's no question it is. I mean, you look at the numbers, and we'll talk about those in a minute. I mean, his approval rating and where he stands vis-a-vis Donald Trump in a general election setting, Michigan is going to be a critical state for the Democrats to hold on to. And so, I think there's no question that it's politically different. Now, the White House would say, of course, Karine Jean-Pierre will say from the podium, of course, we condemn hate in all of its forms. And then, an hour later, they're releasing a task force to combat Islamophobia. I mean, so they're trying to sort of have it both ways, I think, when they should be, I think, a little bit more forceful in terms of denouncing these folks. But that obviously comes at a political cost. And right now, and you're right, look, it is cynical, but politics is a cynical game. I mean, it is a numbers game, and the Biden folks are looking at the numbers right now, and it's that close that they can't afford to do without even tens of thousands of voters in Michigan.
That's right. They need them. So a couple points. It's amazing. You look at Harris's speech. Again, she says, for years, Muslims in America and those perceived to be Muslim have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks. No, in fact, Jews. It's Jews who have suffered that. 2.4% of the population, 60% of the religiously motivated hate crimes. We've seen an uptick since October 7th in anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, anti-Semitic, and Islamophobic incidents. She stuffs anti-Semitic in there in the midst of 4 words that speak to Muslim, bigotry against Muslims. And then as her evidence, she adds the brutal slaying of this 6-year-old Palestinian American boy in Chicago. So she's got 3 words to describe Muslim Americans. She's got 1 incident to support the bigotry allegedly being shown against them, not pointing out the lunacy of the old 70-year-old deranged guy involved in that case. And she sticks his anti-Semitism buried in the middle there without talking about, never mind the 1,400 dead in Israel, but what we've seen on college campuses and on the streets of New York and America since October 7th in this country, totally ignored. It shows you everything you need to know about how they actually feel. So now their plan is to aim to protect Muslims and those perceived to be Muslim from hate, bigotry, and violence. So what does that mean? What are they going to do? They're going to have some sort of task force that's going to, first ever U.S. national strategy to counter Islamophobia. We'll see what that looks like. The Jews, they got a task force that looked like a roundtable at one university. That's what they said they were going to do yesterday, and some coordination on actual criminal threats. Well, hello, that's your job. That's not new. You're required to do the latter under the law. So this whole thing is just absurd. And to your point on the numbers, Tom, here they are. Gallup, a couple months ago. All right, this is more than a couple. This is March 2023. Okay, before this terrorist attack, for the first time, they reported Democrat sympathies shift to Palestinians. And they pointed out that in 2001, the feelings among Democrats on Israelis versus Palestinians and their respective causes were 51% of Dems favored Palestinians, 51 favored Israelis, 16 favored Palestinians, and the rest, I guess, didn't know. So overwhelming support for Israel among Democrats in 2001. As of 2022, it had risen to 38% supported Palestinians from 16. So more than doubled. You can see the growing support among Democrats for Palestinians instead of Israel. And then in 2023, a massive 11-point jump again in favor of Palestinians within the Dem party. And now, as of 2023, before October 7th, the support was now 38% of Dems support Israel, 49% support Palestinians, a 33-point swing since 2001. And that's what he's dealing with now, Tom. He knows, even though I do believe Biden's heart is with the Israelis. I mean, he's just come of age at a time when the entire United States was, for the most part. He's got to deal especially with the young people in his party who have factored this in as part of their race essentialism and just see this as oppressor, oppressed, skin color brown versus perceived white, end of game.
Right. And this is not some, fringe operation here. I mean, think about it. You've got the members of the squad, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, AOC. They are pushing this, Cori Bush. I mean, they are pushing this stuff in Congress, right? Demanding ceasefire, talking about Israel bombing the hospital, pushing that lie. So this is not just some sort of fringe element in the Democratic Party. It is a growing part of the progressive left that includes representation in Congress, and it's something that Biden has to deal with. I would also point out, Megyn, you mentioned this task force. I mean, the Biden administration rolled out a few months ago this anti-Semitism task force, and they did that because they thought politically, the talk at the time was, and their spin on it was that this was to combat rise in anti-Semitic attacks, implying that it was from Republicans that were doing this, right? The Tree of Life Synagogue and the like. And it turns out that actually a lot of anti-Semitism is on the left. And oh, by the way, if they've been working on that task force for 6 or 8 months, and here we are with a massive rise in anti-Semitism in the country, maybe they should spend a little more time trying to figure out what they didn't do on that anti-Semitism task force, because it clearly didn't work.
Yeah, and they got some work to do. I just want to give you one footnote, Holmes, here. This woman, I don't know. It's the bearded lady rabbi.
Bearded lady.
The bearded lady rabbi. I don't know what it is. I'm still confused. I don't understand what's happening there. But this person, I don't even understand that this is a real rabbi, but this person has worked at a national organizer as a national organizer at Bend the Arc, which was launched by the son of George Soros, whose name is Alexander Soros, of course. And this is what this person has written in the past, all right? This biological man posing as a woman. He has posted, this is his concern as a rabbi, real instances of anti-Semitism. Now, you're going to think this would end with are terrible and should be condemned. It's a rabbi. No. Can distract us from the pervasiveness of anti-Black racism. That's so telling. Like that person there
by the way,
embodies all the problems we just discussed.
Entirely. And the bearded lady, perfect encapsulation of where the modern left is. And it's this Marxist hold that's all interconnected in the domestic stuff we've got going on here too. It's BLM, It's sort of this Marxist view that guys like Chris Russo, who you've had on the show a lot, have been talking about in our education system that unfortunately is starting now in elementary schools. This is a real problem. And it's not, this isn't just a today problem. This is a going forward problem. This is an ideology that's insane. And as America, if you can't figure out how to counter that in any serious way, if you try to placate it, it's only going to make it a lot worse. And I'm disgusted that this is a part of the constituency of the Democratic Party. I am glad that it is now open and evident for people to see. Some of us have been talking about this for a while, but it's really hard to ignore now. If you're a Jewish voter anywhere in this country, boy, I mean, what does today's Democratic Party have for you? Not a lot.
Good luck at the national convention. You don't know who you're going to be standing next to. All right, stand by. Quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the Biden crime family. And we've got to get to the issue of Ron DeSantis' boots. I'm sorry, it seemed petty to me at first, but now I'm very into it, and I've got to get you into it too. Stand by. Finding an honest doctor that isn't following in the footsteps of big pharma can feel impossible. That's why millions of men and women have turned to one Texas doctor and the 7 reasons he says anyone over the age of 50 should be drinking this one thing. It's not milk or another calcium-rich drink. Instead, it is a unique protein that naturally declines with age and can significantly increase bone strength and soothe joint pain. He says it can minimize wrinkles and cellulite too. Hello? Not to mention enhance hair follicle thickness and can even reverse nail damage, with users reporting results in as little as 2 weeks. He's offering viewers up to 45% off his bone, joint, and ligament restoring formula at nativepath.online/MK. It has thousands of five-star reviews and over 4 million jars sold. Every order comes with a 365-day money-back guarantee, so try it today and get your money back if you want. Megyn Kelly viewers can visit nativepath.online/MK to get up to 45% off while supplies last. We've got to talk about Joe Biden. All along, everybody's been saying, where's the proof? Where's the proof? Where's the proof of, that he got paid other than Hunter? It's the loser's son. You can't pin that on the dad. This is post his time in the vice presidency. That's important. But it's also still relevant because it was pre his time in the presidency and, could potentially be affecting the way he affects policy and so on. And this is one of the things the House is investigating. So now I'm going to walk you through what Comer just put out. He released it on Wednesday, just yesterday, 12 pages, latest discovery from subpoenaed bank records. It's a $40,000 check from his brother James and James's wife, Sarah and James Biden's personal checking account, written to Joe Biden, dated September 3, 2017. Comer says the money chain shows this originated with the Chinese, with Hunter's Chinese business partners, whom Hunter had threatened like a month earlier in that now infamous WhatsApp message where he was like, I'm sitting right here with my dad. I can't understand why you haven't responded. Why hasn't the commitment been fulfilled? Tell the director I would like to resolve this now before it gets out of hand, and now means tonight. Remember, he was threatening this CEFC, this Chinese energy guy. And then sure enough, that payments started to come into Hunter. But so far they've been saying that's to Hunter. Hunter's a loser, but he set up these deals, doesn't affect Joe. Well, listen to this. So August 3rd, 2017, and the threat to the CEFC was July 30th. August 3rd, money begins flowing. Hunter opens a bank account in the name of Hudson West III, which is a joint venture between Hunter and the Chinese. Okay, Hudson West III. August 8th, a $5 million wire from the CEFC connected business Northern International Capital. We knew about that. Hunter transferred $400,000 out of Hudson West III and into his corporation, Owasco. So there's $400,000 that he got from the Chinese that he transfers. August 14th, Hunter wires $150,000 from Hudson West into Lion Hall Group. That's owned by James and Sarah Biden. So $150,000 of the Chinese money goes to Joe Biden's brother and Joe Biden's sister-in-law. 2 weeks later, Sarah Biden, Joe's sister-in-law, signed a withdrawal ticket for $50,000 from that Lion Hall Group bank account. This is how laundering is done. if I want to pay off Josh Holmes, I don't just send him a check directly. We set up 4 different companies that the money has to go through, so it's a lot harder to trace. So Sarah Biden withdraws $50,000 from this Lion Hall Group bank account, and on the same day deposits that $50,000 into hers and her husband's joint personal checking account. All right, so she's gotten the money from Hunter directly, who got it from the Chinese. It goes into her personal account, and guess what happens? September 3rd, 2017, she signs $40,000 of that $50,000 payable to Joe Biden, claiming it was a loan repayment. But that $40,000 clearly came out of the $50,000. We know that because after she made the transfer, her account only had $46 left. She must have spent the $10,000 on herself, and she gave $40,000 to Joe. It's pretty explicit. And actually, if you look closely, that $40,000 Joe got was exactly 10% of the $400,000 Hunter Biden got from the CEFC. Exactly 10%. The Hunter Biden laptop, which we were told is disinformation, has Hunter complaining he gets 10%. Oh, he has to give like half of his money, but he gives 10% to the big guy, right? That he talked with Tony Bobulinski about. Got to reserve 10% for the big guy. And that's never explicitly been said to be Joe Biden, but witnesses involved say it was. It's a clear money trail, Josh, from the Chinese to Hunter to Joe Biden's brother and sister-in-law to Joe Biden.
It's amazing how all of these things that we were reliably told by Joe Biden and his friends in the corporate media that were absolutely not issues and, of course, never happened, are all happening and have all happened. And what's so fascinating about this is the collective lack of interest in pursuing any of this beyond, thank God, a House Republican majority and Jamie Comer who have uncovered it. And like this stuff is not, as you just suggested, it's not particularly impossible to figure out. And you'd think if you had some journalists out there that spent a fraction of the time looking at this that they did at Russiagate, for example, this would have all been evident prior to the 2020 election, let alone 3 years later. So here we are now with, by the way, what the House majority did by setting up the impeachment inquiry sort of allowed for a greater emphasis to get these subpoenas out and obtain this information. I mean, we talked to Jamie Comer when they first started getting into it. And what he said is, we've got a lot of smoke here, but what we're looking for ultimately is these bank records that would actually show a payment to Joe Biden. Well, lo and behold, here it is. It's amazing time and again how all of the things that were suspected and discussed by Tony Bobulinski prior to the 2020 election are true. They're true. And unless I've missed it, it's still there. I don't even seen a lot of front page stories about this. It's like a press release from Jamie Comer, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that's great." Anyway, let's talk more about the Muslim Brotherhood and what they have to say. Yeah, yes. Let's talk a bit more about combating Islamophobia. That's really where we know we're over the mark. Tom, I mean, this is unbelievable. Holmes raised a good point. Can you imagine if they had anything like this on Trump and the Russians? Anything like this, it would be dominating every news cycle in America.
Of course. I mean, if it was Don Jr. or Eric Trump, if it was his laptop, if there were emails there that implicated Donald Trump, of course. I mean, and every single, outlet, the New York Times, Washington Post, would have 7 reporters working on it around the clock, digging through all of this stuff. And it's, it goes to show, and it's worse than Josh says. I mean, it's not just, yes, the conservative media reports on what the, House oversight is finding, but, the other outlets, the New York Times, Washington Post, it's like it never existed. They don't write anything about it. I mean, and they completely ignore it. And it just shows that, there's a level of corruption in the media that has become very clear over the last few years. And we've seen, working in concert with the government and other entities to really, censor, suppress, stifle information that is unhelpful to, to Joe Biden or the Democrats in general. And this is just another example of it. I mean, this kind of evidence produced against not just Donald Trump, but any Republican. I mean, if Ron DeSantis happens to win the presidential race next year and something like this were to happen to him, absolutely the media would be making it would be a nonstop feeding frenzy until questions were answered. And right now, Joe Biden's not getting asked any of these questions at all. It just gets waved away.
And let's not forget what he said in the 2020 debate when this came up Trump v. Biden, what he said. Listen.
I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever in my life. I have not taken a single penny from any country whatsoever, ever.
So that's just a weaselly way of getting out of the fact that you definitely appear to have taken the money. You just made it go through 4 different, different hoops before it got to you. But it's like, unbelievable how it just looks right in the camera. Yeah, right. It's different. I said, by the time it got to me, it was squeaky clean. I didn't see any Chinese money involved there. It was all dollars. It's really absurd. All right, let me shift gears and talk Republican politics because interesting things are happening in the GOP race. I realize that it's all sort of, second tier right now because Trump is dominating in all these polls. They're calling it the undercard race. But the undercard race is getting interesting. Nikki Haley is definitely having a surge of sorts. She's now number 2, according to RealClearPolitics' average. She is in the number 2 spot behind Trump. He's got 31 points on her. He's at 46.5. But now she's in the number 2 spot, 14.8. DeSantis in 3rd at 10. In Iowa, you guys have got Trump on, this is the average of all polls. Trump's at 48. DeSantis is at 17. Haley's at 11. So she's 3rd in Iowa, though there was recently an Iowa poll that had better news for her. And then you've got South Carolina. South Carolina, Trump's still at 49. He's up 30 over his next competitor, but she's in 2nd in South Carolina at 18.8. DeSantis is in 3rd at 10. And South Carolinians basically said they can't stand Ramaswamy and do not want to see him again. So those are the main players now. DeSantis and Haley vying for chief undercard person and Trump walloping everybody. Tom, where does that leave us?
Well, I mean, it leaves us with, I think, what we've known for a long time. Absent some additional significant surges by either of those candidates, Donald Trump is in a really strong position to win the Iowa caucuses in 74 days or something, and New Hampshire after that. And if he wins both of those states, I think he's going to have the nomination locked up. Now, there was this, this Des Moines Register poll that came out earlier in the week that had Haley at 16. She was up 10 points and had Trump at what, I don't know exactly what it was. I think in the 40s, but suggested that, points up. But suggested that there were folks who were supporting Trump that were still open to voting for someone else. So it suggested there might be a little bit of fluidity in that race and potential surprises. But again, we really haven't seen that manifest itself in the data in a consistent, significant way. It'll have to happen soon. And again, there have been late moves in Iowa. Rick Santorum was at 1% around Christmas time, ended up winning a couple weeks later. So that was a different race, though, where you didn't have a dominant front runner the entire time. But that isn't to say that Trump might still not come out on top. I mean, the odds are very much that he will at this point. But and then Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis are effectively running for second place, and in politics that gets you nothing. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it's interesting, Holmes, if you forget that Trump is up there, right? It's like getting to be a horse race amongst the undercard.
No, it's right. I mean, look, Nikki Haley's been running the best presidential campaign in the field and has been since moment one. And I think that's reflected out in these rising poll numbers. Her moment sort of happened in Milwaukee, and she's built on top of that every week since, and is now, as you just suggested, in second place. But, in addition to what Tom said, which I very much agree with, the only other piece of this puzzle is the consolidation of the rest of the field. Right. And we saw Mike Pence get out last weekend at the RJC event. There's going to be others. Right. I mean, you mentioned Ramaswamy. It sounds like he's going to do a big spend at this point. If that doesn't move his numbers, what's his decision look like? Tim Scott is another one who he was on the program a couple of weeks ago, and he said they're going all in on Iowa. If that comes up short and, he's not in a striking distance or not second or third, does he decide that now is not the time for his candidacy? All of those things, you look at the New Hampshire polls and the South Carolina polls where you have Trump under 50%. If he's under 50% and you get some consolidation, you can make things interesting. But right now, there's not a lot interesting. Megyn. I mean, he's got these massive leads, and it's very, very difficult to see what would dislodge that. I mean, look, if the news of the last 6 months doesn't change that, I don't know what the hell is out there that could possibly change that. So I think he looks pretty comfortable at this point.
Well, I mean, so if the field could consolidate, and I don't think somebody like Vivek has any reason to drop out, because there's a lot of speculation about whether he's in there just to get a job in the Trump administration. So why would he drop out? You know, he's not going to respond to any do your duty as a Republican, help the field consolidate so there's a two-person race. He may be there solely as a spoiler for Trump, who he may be trying to please. This is a theory that gets bandied about. You know, he says it's not true. He says he's genuinely running, thinking he could win. But what the reports are, Tom, that DeSantis's super PAC has said, we're not going to spend any more right now. We're not saying never, but we're not spending on you anymore for the foreseeable future. And Nikki Haley is on a bit of a roll, you know, and if you look at sort of history, her trajectory is hitting at a nice time and her role could keep going up. And if you had a Republican Party that really wanted someone other than Trump, and it's split. If you look at that latest poll in Des Moines Register, it's split kind of right down the middle. It's 50-50 Trump versus non-Trump. You could get one candidate to win. You could get the support of the Republican Party behind somebody other than Trump. They're not averse to a non-Trump Republican, the voters. They're not. But it's like Trump's being treated like the incumbent, and they're just kind of going with the guy who's looks like the winner. Everybody likes to back a winner. And so what are the odds now? Because Nikki Haley's supporters looking at DeSantis saying, you tried, you lost. You have no momentum. Soon you'll have no money. And it's time for you to step aside and let Nikki be the non-Trump alternative.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there are tough choices ahead for these candidates. And I've said exactly what Josh said, which is, you know, all along, it didn't matter how many people got in this race. It matters when they get out of the race and whether they're able to consolidate around an anti-Trump, non-Trump candidate alternative prior to, you know, Iowa or New Hampshire. Because if it doesn't happen in those two states, I mean, he's off to the races and it's going to be really, really hard to stop him at that point. Could you get somebody who finishes, you know, if Nikki Haley finishes a close second in Iowa and she can parlay that into something in New Hampshire and then get to South Carolina? Sure, possible. But if people stay in this race, it's not going to happen. And you're right. I mean, the thing for DeSantis, I mean, he's been going down the entire time. If you look at his national numbers, I mean, he's had every opportunity. He's had all of the, resources that he would have needed to have made this a race. He's just run a terrible campaign. I mean, his strategy has just been horrendous from the beginning. And the idea that he was going to win over these, you know, Trump-leaning voters, people who like Trump but were open to voting someone else by attacking Donald Trump from the right on immigration and, you know, transgender stuff. I mean, it was just, hindsight's 20/20, but you didn't even need hindsight for this. I mean, this was a terrible strategy from the beginning. And so he's really squandered, I think, his chance. And now you've got, again, Nikki Haley rising. Tim Scott, I think, squandered his chance as well. We saw Vivek had his moment, and he's been on a downward slide ever since then. So it's Nikki Haley's, moment to become that alternative. But will a guy like Ron DeSantis, I mean, how tough of a decision is that going to be for him to pull the plug on his campaign? I mean, probably better to do it now than wait and finish, fifth in Iowa or third in Iowa by, 30 points or something, because that would be even more humiliating for him. But yeah, tough choices ahead in the very near future for a lot of these candidates if they want to stop Trump.
How do you see these numbers, Holmes? Because on the general election matches, again, RCP averages, Trump's up 0.7 over Biden. Biden beats DeSantis by 1.1 percentage point. Haley beats Biden by 1.6 percentage points. So Haley's got more than double the percentage points in terms of polling to beat Biden than Trump does. But none of that factors in the celebrity factor, that sort of incumbency factor that Trump will have, but also his motivation to the left. So how do you see the most likely candidate to beat Joe Biden?
Well, honestly, Trump is such a known commodity here that you don't have to do a lot of guesswork. I mean, it concerns me a lot as a Republican voter to know that in all of these polls, when they ask the question of would you never vote for somebody, Trump's are consistently the highest amongst the general election. I mean, we're talking well past the 50% marker, which tells you that remaining undecided may be open for business, but they're not open for Donald Trump. That concerns me. It also concerns me if you look at Joe Biden's ballot question, where he's lagging the most. Amongst who he's lagging the most, we just had a segment about that. Young, very progressive people who aren't totally satisfied about where he has taken his administration. Do you think they're going to vote for Donald Trump? I don't think so. Like the best you could possibly do is that they don't show up in the context of a presidential election against Donald Trump. We've got now, 6 years of evidence that they, in fact, do show up and they can't wait to show up. So I think, look, Nikki's got a huge draw. I think any of the other candidates, it's very unknown what their ultimate ceiling is. There's no question in my mind that Donald Trump's ceiling is lower. It doesn't mean he can't win, but it's a real thin margin there. Yeah, everyone's got their minds made up about Trump. I mean, this current conflict in the Middle East may do him some good politically, too, since he can basically say, was the Middle East on fire when I was there? I did the Abraham Accords. I moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Nothing happened. Look what happened once this guy took over. All right, stand by. If you guys can stick with me 10 more minutes, we've got to get to the DeSantis boots issue. We'll pick it up right after this break. Don't go away. Let me tell you a story about a guy named Leo Grillo. Leo was on a road trip and came across a Doberman. Now, this dog was severely underweight and clearly in trouble. Leo rescued the dog and named him Delta. Sadly, Delta was just one of so many animals that need help. And this inspired Leo to start Delta Rescue, the largest no-kill, care-for-life animal sanctuary in the world. They have rescued thousands of dogs, cats, and horses from the wilderness, and they provide their animals shelter, love, safety, and a home. It's dedication and everlasting love to animals. That's Leo's mission and legacy. Delta Rescue relies solely on contributions to stay open. And if you want to be caring for these animals and you want that to be part of your legacy, speak with your estate planner because there are tax-saving estate planning benefits to helping these animals too. You can grow your estate while letting your love for animals live well into the future. Check out the estate planning tab on their website to learn more and speak with your advisor. We call dog man's best friend for a reason. You can help those who need it most. Visit deltarescue.org today to learn more. deltarescue.org. Quickly, before we get to Bootgate, DebateGate is up first. Next week, there is the next Republican presidential debate. Again, we don't think Trump will be there. One never knows, but we don't think so. It's going to be on November 8th. It's going to be hosted by NBC News, Tom. Lester Holt, Kristen Welker, and then they'll have Hugh Hewitt of Salem Media also partnering on the debate. And there are many people who think this was not the best decision to allow NBC to host a Republican debate. What do you think?
I mean, it's crazy that Republicans continue to do this and to have people moderate their debates who are, Lester Holt has moderated debates before. We know kind of his political leanings. And so again, this is a primary debate. I'm not talking about a general election debate. Okay. This is a primary debate. The Democrats would never allow, some right-wing folks to moderate their debates. And yet Republicans continue to do this. I mean, even when Fox News did it and Fox Business, it wasn't fantastic. I mean, and that's partly a function of the field and Donald Trump not being there and all these other atmospherics. But in general, people, I think, reacted negatively to the news that, and again, this is Ronna McDaniel. She's the one who's in charge of selecting the outlets and I think has some say in who those outlets select as their moderators. And so, it's just the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I doubt they're going to get a different result this time.
Josh, it's interesting. Like I would, of course, moderate a Democratic primary, presidential debate, but I don't think I'm the right person for that. I think I could be better than anybody on a general election debate. I really do. I'm a registered independent. I would never, I of course have a preference for Republican candidates given my own personal politics, but you would never see it if I were to moderate a general election debate. You would not see it. I would make sure. So that's all we can ask. Everybody goes into it with their own personal politics. And what we ask as the viewers is, I don't want to see it. I don't want to know from your questions where you stand. But to think that Lester and Kristen Welker have a deep inherent understanding of what Republican voters care about is to be a fool. And that is why, and Hugh Hewitt, with respect to Hugh Hewitt, he can't make up for what's going to be happening to him 2 seats and 1 seat away. So it really does make more sense to pick people who understand Republican politics at this stage of the game.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm glad Hugh is on that stage. I think he always does a good job with it. I mean, look, the dilemma of hosting debates in the Republican Party is that you got to have media partners that are not only willing to do it, but have the distribution power of reaching millions of people, right? And look, you could do it, Megyn, no question about it. And I'm sure there are different ways to handle it. But if you look at like NBC's or the CNNs, I mean, there's a reason why Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and Nikki Haley and all of them have done CNN town halls that nobody thinks.
The Ruthless variety program has more viewers than CNN. You know it, I know it, and the American people need to know it.
Thank you, Megyn. I appreciate that little plug. And you're quite right. But I think, look, part of what they're trying to do is reach different demographics. And so we've got to choose your news culture right now, where unfortunately there's an awful lot of candidates out there, and some of them have been doing a better job at this, that basically only go back to the same 3 or 4 wells over and over and over again. Not only does that not give them an opportunity to make a mistake, which is why they're doing it, but it limits your potential voter base in a very significant way. And I think if you are a Republican and you're looking at what happened in 2020 and you're thinking about a redux here, that concerns you. The idea that you're not reaching anybody in the center right of the electorate or somebody that doesn't tune in to Hannity every night is alarming. You've got to figure out how to reach those people. And so far, there's been very few campaigns that have done that on their own. So it is a little bit of a dilemma. I love if there was a really off-the-shelf solution to it. I mean, look, I got plenty of space here in the Ruthless Variety program, and Megyn, you are welcome anytime to come interrogate. I've seen what you do to these candidates. There is absolutely no stone unturned. I'm not
on their side.
No, once they're on anybody's side.
No, once they're on that debate stage, I am not on their side at all. I may wind up voting for them, but I'm definitely not going to be on their side in the actual questioning at a debate. Hell no. It's me for the viewers, me against them, me testing them to make sure they're worthy of the people watching behind me. Okay, let's talk about Bootgate, because it's actually a really fun story, and we need it. We need this after the dark news coverage of the past few weeks. Bootgate involves Ron DeSantis. And when I first saw, I'm like, this is so petty. This is so stupid. I'm completely into it now. Okay. So here's what happened. Originally, there was a TikTok video that kicked off the questioning about whether DeSantis is artificially inflating his height with these boots. Look at this. So they are an odd looking boot. Like the front of them kind of turns up. And I don't know why the front of them turns up. But the theory is because there are lifts secretly inside of them. So then Patrick Bet-David gets DeSantis. Look, see the way they all turned up at the end. Anyway, Patrick Bet-David has DeSantis on his show last week and had the following exchange.
I'm sure your marketing team points out how they're trying to troll you in the marketplace. Play this clip. This on TikTok went viral. It doesn't have 1 million views. It doesn't have 10 million views. This thing's got 1.2 million likes. And some people are wondering,
what are they? I don't even. I haven't seen that.
They've not shown this to you. Okay, no. What they're trying to say with this is that in your boots you have heels.
No.
That's what they're trying to say.
Those are just standard off the rack Lucchese.
How tall are you? How tall are you, Governor? How tall?
5'11".
5'11". Okay. Why don't you wear tennis shoes and dress shoes?
I do wear tennis shoes when I work out. Yeah, 100%.
You do.
Yep.
Okay. I got a gift for you. I'd love for you to wear. Okay, I shop at Ferragamo. Okay. And
oh my God.
I don't accept gifts. I can't accept it.
I totally get it.
I'm sorry.
So Patrick Bet-David tried to get him to put on the boots, and obviously was going to see how tall he really is, and he said no. It gets so awkward, cringy, but kind of interesting too. Trump puts out a statement on it through his spokesperson, referring to, and I'll get to this, a scathing new article from Politico about Ron DeSanctimonious's high-heeled shoes. He goes on to say, in another moment of insanity, because he definitely believes that these are lifts inside the boots. Ron offered up the laughable claim that he is 5'11". Instead of telling the truth and just being comfortable in his own skin, he resorts to borderline psychotic behavior by lying to the American people. Is this what the country wants in a president? With a close-up of Ron DeSantis's shoes here. Okay, so here is my own. Here, Politico. We got to get to this before I show you my own personal evidence, members of the jury. Politico on Tuesday publishes an in-depth piece on Bootgate. Okay, first look at this video. This is Debbie Murphy's concerned by this video. It's sort of odd, the way the walk. I can see why people think maybe there are lifts inside these boots. Politico gets 3 expert shoemakers to analyze pictures of DeSantis and his boots, walking, sitting, standing, what have you. They get, I guess, a guest columnist to actually write the piece who's a menswear writer. He's written for the Washington Post, Financial Times, and so on. So they put it in the hands of an expert who then interviews 3 expert shoemakers. And they all have concluded he is wearing lifts. There is no doubt. 3 things stick out to me, said one of them. Graham Ebner, the Austin-based cowboy bootmaker. The instep, that's where you normally would tie your sneakers, like where the ties of a sneaker normally are. The instep, the toe spring, and where the ball of his foot is sitting in the boots. In almost every photo of DeSantis, you see an unusually high instep that angles nearly 60 degrees. They've estimated the degrees, my friends. Angled nearly 60 degrees, pushing the leather outward and making it unusually taut. Unusually taut, I say. Another guy says, he's basically standing on his tippy toes. You can see it. His shins look unusually long for his proportions, and estimated that the lifts inside of his shoes, that's in addition to the heel you can see, are about 1.5 inches. DeSantis denies it, says the governor does not pad his boots, but if he ever needed anything to line a, trash can, he'll use that Politico article. So, all right, thoughts on Bootgate. It's so fun. I don't know. Do you guys wear boots?
Instep. You hate a taut instep. That's as rough as it gets.
Taut's normally kind of hot. Who doesn't want to be taut? But I guess it's bad if it's in your instep. I don't know. They say tall people are more likely to win elections. So Bevan, it could matter.
I guess it could. I mean, listen, I was talking to Josh during the break. I'm 5'9", so I'm all for lifts. I mean, I think Ron DeSantis should just lean into it and go for like those, Gene Simmons, Kiss, like platform shoes, just the bigger the better, whatever. That's what I'd do if I was in his circumstance. But there is a thing about not wanting to seem small on stage, especially when you're standing next to a guy like Donald Trump, who's 6'2", and some of the other candidates. So maybe he's doing it, maybe he's not. I'm not sure it's affecting his campaign, but it certainly is the story of the moment.
Holmes, I'm going to give you another piece of evidence to consider. Okay, I went and I interviewed Governor DeSantis. Now, all right, so there's another piece of evidence for the jury. I interviewed DeSantis, and we sat together. I don't know if we have the picture of the two of us sitting together. And I definitely was wearing high heels. Well, this is the two of us standing. All right, just hold this here. Hold this picture, okay? So I had probably 2.5-inch heels on. And he had boots on, like those. He had those very boots that we've been showing, those black boots. And they were, I'd say, at least a 2-inch heel. So that kind of strikes us as even. So we should actually right here be looking our actual height difference, because we both had probably the same amount of lift in our heel. This is excluding the possibility that he had an additional lift inside. Now, I am 5'6" without my heels, and he says he's 5'11". So there's about a 5. Does that look like a 5-inch difference to you? To me, I can buy it.
You have such
I can buy that that's
posture.
A 5-inch. Yeah, that could be a 5-inch difference between us. But what the allegation is that is in fact, if he didn't have the secret lift inside the boot, there would only be about a 3-inch difference between us, and he would be a lot lower in this picture. Members of the jury, Holmes, I don't know what to say.
Just from a substantive standpoint, campaigns are totally brutal. And having run a lot
They're
of
so
them,
mean.
when you when you're like real sort of in the soup, it's not just about like debating the issues and trying to get to right or left of something or center of the electorate. Sometimes you just have this toolbox full of stuff that you want to throw out there and try to get people talking about, because it's just sort of one, it makes somebody look bad, but two, it also just throws your opponent off entirely. And Trump has been really, really good at doing this, right? Their campaign, remember the pudding fingers thing? And now this thing. And one of the reasons I've been sort of bearish on where DeSantis's campaign is with an awful lot of this stuff is that they have some sensitivity to doing that back, certainly to Donald Trump. And when you have one side that is willing to deploy every tactic in the book and get the national conversation about whether he's wearing lifts, and you're not willing to say, like, I'm going to take my lift and shove it up your fat ass, like it's a one-sided discussion. Like, you can never get out of it. And you're like, well, another thing about the border wall. Well, that's not where the people, like, you got to be entertaining too. And I think that he's consistently, and it's not trying to be a pun, but he's had him on his heels.
Right. I don't know. I think if I were a guy in his position and I did not have lifts inside the boot, I might actually take off the boot and show it to Patrick Bet David. I might, like, go ahead, take a look at my boot. I know what you're doing. You're ridiculous. Here, look inside the boot right now. I mean, it's a little beneath the dignity, but it would have put it to rest once and for all. Or another route could be like what Tom just did. I do wear them. I've always been kind of sensitive about the fact that I'm not a little taller. You caught me in my insecurity. Maybe other guys out there can relate. I don't know. But I do love these boots, and you can get them from this manufacturer, and they'll give you an extra 2 inches. And unless you run for president, no one will ever be the wiser.
Or
that
you
could have been a moment.
Come out on the next debate stage on stilts or something. I mean, just make the whole thing a clown show out of it. I'm sure people would love that.
Listen, I got bad news for Governor DeSantis. He's what, I think 4 or 5 years, a few years younger than I am. And it only goes one direction from this point forward, my friend. I mean, just got to own it. Because as you get older, it starts going down, 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 down. My mom always says that's not the only thing.
I don't believe
I'm
that's
telling
happening.
you. My mother, she tells me, she talks about a certain other region of her body, saying she used to be at 38 double D and now she's at 42 long.
Somebody tell the bearded lady. He's going to be very upset.
And on that note, thank you guys. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megyn.
All right. Now, audience, don't go away, because up next, we're going to have a great deep dive into free speech with the man. We've been referencing Fire. He's been on before. But this is the main guy who's been trying to hold all these universities responsible for their abandonment of free speech principles, firing professors, chastising student groups, getting speakers thrown off campus over the past few years, definitely post George Floyd. But even before that, they were doing this. How does he feel about their newfound commitment to free speech now that it's Hamas supporters out there? We'll talk about it next. Some people take CBD for better sleep or less stress and more calm. Some take it for pain relief, better energy, or better focus and concentration. Today, I want to tell you about CB Distillery and their over 2 million satisfied customers. According to a poll of their customers, 90% reported that they sleep better with CBD. 81% said CBD helps with stress, and 80% said CBD helps with aches and pains after physical activity. If you struggle to get a good night's sleep, if you're dealing with too much stress and could use a little calm in your life, if you suffer from pain and discomfort, especially after physical exercise, you could give CBD a try from cbdistillery.com. Use my 20% discount by visiting cbdistillery.com and entering my initials MK to get that discount. No prescription is required. cbdistillery.com, promo code MK for 20% off. Some of the nation's top law firms are now putting the nation's top law schools on notice, writing in a letter telling the deans they are alarmed by the rampant anti-Semitism they are witnessing on campuses, and saying in no uncertain terms, quote, "As employers who recruit from each of your law schools, we look to you to ensure your students who hope to join our firms after graduation are prepared to be an active part of workplace communities that have zero tolerance policies for any form of discrimination or harassment." This comes as we learn new details about a disgusting display at Harvard targeting Jews. Here's a quick reminder. Well, one of the groups that's been doing the hard work to uncover exactly who these people are made an alarming discovery. The group that's doing the investigating is called the Canary Mission. And they say one of the men taunting the Jews on the Harvard campus is a Harvard student and an editor of the Harvard Law Review. They say his name is Ibrahim Barmal. And here he is.
Stop touching me. Shame! 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 He's recording.
Don't touch him. Don't touch him.
Maybe he's our next Supreme Court justice. Already there are calls to kick him out of Harvard. And get this, the Washington Free Beacon reports this same guy, Ibrahim, attended Stanford and in 2018 won an award for outstanding service. Joining me now, co-author of the new book, The Canceling of the American Mind. Cancel culture undermines trust and threatens us all, but there is a solution. He wrote this along with our former intern here on the MK Show, Ricky Schlott. Greg Lukianoff is president and CEO of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE for short. Greg, welcome back to the show. Great to have you. You've been a busy man lately.
It has not been dull in the free speech world.
No, it hasn't. All right, so we'll get to individual cancellations and all that in a minute. But first, let's just start with, you're the number one person whose reaction I wanted when I saw these universities come out, college after college, to say, we believe in free speech. We would never interfere. You know, these pro-Palestinian students on the campuses chanting from the river to the sea. We don't get involved in that because we're a place for learning, not really for judging. It's such a lie, Greg.
Yeah, no, I've been doing this for 22 years, and to watch universities suddenly discover free speech and even talk about institutional neutrality when it relates to, you know, the Hamas's horrifying attacks, is almost comedic. Now, if they really mean it this time, that they believe in free speech and neutrality from this point on, swell, but you have to forgive me for being super cynical and skeptical, because just like at 9/11, when they saw the threats as coming from off campus, they suddenly discover free speech and academic freedom. When the threat comes from on campus, which is most of the time, it's activist students, administrators play a huge role, and sometimes, embarrassingly enough, professors themselves, they always cave. So I think this newfound commitment to free speech is probably going to last like 3 weeks.
Yeah, like 2 minutes. But I'm looking forward to holding them to it. You know, I mean, when Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard, came out on her third try after she'd been shamed by the previous dean, Lauren Summers, and finally said, okay, no, we're really committed to free speech. I said, you know what, bullshit. And I cited your organization because I know they were last. Harvard was last.
Dead last in our campus free speech ranking, and boy, did they earn that ranking. People were like, no, that's a stunt. I'm like, no, it's based on 13 factors, the largest study of student free speech opinion ever conducted, and 4 massive databases.
My God. So that was my first point. My second point was, but you know what? Let's go with it. Let's take her at her word. Terrific. Welcome to the party, Claudine. Great to have you here. Looking forward to you enforcing this when the, women's rights activists want to march on Harvard saying a man can't become a woman. There's only one thing that's a woman and it doesn't involve a man, right? Or the people who want to push back on the BLM radicals and so on. Like, I can't wait to see her commitment then.
Well, and of course, people say she just started, so you should give her a chance. But I'm pretty sure she was one of the people involved in the prosecution of Roland Fryer, who was one of the people who showed evidence that the racial disparity in shooting is not actually what most people think. And then, ta-da! Just like cancel culture works, suddenly he's being investigated for something unrelated, which is not a coincidence. And meanwhile, it was just, I think, last year where Carol Hooven, who is in our book. Carol Hooven is a brilliant person. She's a lovely person. She was on Fox News to talk about her book, Testosterone. She went on and she gave a stirring talk about being compassionate towards trans people, using their pronouns, all of this kind of stuff. But then she said, biological sex is real, and we do our students a disservice, and we do science a disservice if we pretend this isn't true. And immediately, of course, a DEI administrator started calling her out, and then you started having student petitions, oftentimes encouraged by administrators. Her friends abandoned her, not all of them, but some of them. And only people like Steve Pinker came out, who's an author and one of our advisory committee people who really believes in freedom of speech, came out to defend her. But a healthy university, everybody would have come out to defend her, especially the university president. So Harvard, to say the least, it will take years to convince me that Harvard has really changed its ways. And they're not going to get off the hook just because they said the right thing in a bad circumstance once.
Well, you mentioned DEI, and technically these people who we've spent so much money on at all these universities, never mind corporations, should be the people to be cracking down on this. Aren't they there to protect minority voices and make sure that people aren't harmed by violent rhetoric? Right? We've been hearing all this stuff. Well, Jews are the minority. They are a minority. They're only 2% of America. So they're going to be a minority on any college campus. And yet we're not seeing even the Biden administration, as it creates like its little task force, say, you know what, we're going to put this through the DEI administrators at Harvard and Brown and Penn and Stanford. No, they know very well the DEI administrators won't help this particular minority.
Well, yeah, and that's something that we talk about a lot in our book, because I think because of my first book, or my last book, Coddling the American Mind, people think that what Haidt and I are saying is that for most of my career until 2013, like the bad guys were administrators, and then the bad guys, like the censors, and then suddenly 2014, it became the students. That's not really what happened. Now it's the administrators working with the students that has created this absolute disaster for free speech. And I want to be clear here. The last 5-6 years for academic freedom have been disastrous. And watching people who suddenly think that their jobs might be on the line, suddenly like, oh my God, this is accountability culture, but not the kind that I like, but completely unaware of the fact that this has been going on at a disastrous level for years now. I want every single one of them to either purchase themselves or have purchased for them a copy of Counseling of the American Mind, where we put all the evidence to make the point that in the last 50 years, we have not seen a threat to academic freedom like of the likes of cancel culture. It even claimed more professors than McCarthyism did.
Mm-hmm. We talked, a couple of them stand out to me, and still really, I find them very chilling because, we can kind of talk about it surface level and breeze past it, but these people's lives get ruined. Poor Roland Fryer was a gift to us all, and he's been completely shamed out of a job, basically. I mean, they have him on ice, and he's not been able to do his work and his studies. Okay. And then there was this guy, this is Canadian, but still it stuck with me because we did this report over the summer with a Free Press reporter who came on to talk about this guy up there, a teacher who was making the most mild of mild comments, trying to say, I think his point was, I used to live in America and they're worse than we are. Canada's not as bad as America is when it comes to race and stuff like that. And there was a Black woman up there, DEI instructor, who went off on him because she thought he was trying to downplay Canadian racism in their school system. And really, he was like, no, we're racist too, just not quite as racist as America. We have a bit of the soundbite, but listen to it, understanding not only did he have an enormous shitstorm unleashed on this guy, he wound up dying by suicide. The stress of what they did to him was so bad. Here it is.
I just want to make a comment about the Canada-U.S. thing, and I have a little bit of a challenge of it. I did my student teaching in the U.S. and have spent a lot of time in the U.S. And to say here, honestly, that Canada is not a more just society than the United States is, and we talked about facts and figures. I invite everyone here to do some research. And you look at Yeah, absolutely. And look at things like education, and look how more, you think about a system we have in Ontario where every student is funded equally. You go to the United States, they're funded based on their tax base. We have a public education system where everyone is funded the same way. It's not like that in the United States. We have a healthcare system here where everyone has access to healthcare. It is not the same way in the United States. So to sit here and say, all honesty, we're talking about facts and figures, and to walk into the classroom tomorrow and say Canada's just as bad as the United States, I think we're doing an incredible disservice to our learners.
No one backed him. And this exact same thing has happened to countless numbers of educators here in the United States, K through 12 and college in particular, though thankfully with not as dire a result. But they piled on him so badly within the school system. Administrators who knew he had bent over backwards to take care of minority students throughout his career. And the pile-on was so bad without a single defender over that anodyne comment that he took
Based
his own
in data.
life. It's horrific what they've done.
I have a whole chapter on my friend, a short chapter on my friend Mike Adams. He was the rarest of conservatives on campus in that he wasn't a libertarian. He was an evangelical social conservative, and they hired him back when he was a lefty. But he converted after he got, or right before he got tenure. And he was one of the first professors I defended back in 9/11 were some of my first cases. And Adams got in trouble because he called out a student who wrote the entire campus community saying America had this coming. It was totally America's fault that we got attacked on 9/11. And I think he said something like, well, that's First Amendment protected, just as bigoted and foolish speech always is. That was the entirety of what he said. And they launched an investigation of him, which was just crazy. And I'd say on the grand scheme of things, like on a 10-point scale, this would end up being like a 3 or a 4 on the outrageousness scale for the rest of my career. But at the time, I was pretty shocked. Fast forward to 2020, he's made a name for himself as being like a jokey conservative, on campus. Like he writes for Town Hall. Like he actually said that I inspired him to learn about Lenny Bruce and to have this much more kind of comedic take on his conservative activism. And he made a joke in 2020 on Twitter, likening lockdowns to slavery. And they came for the student mobs and administrators came for his career. And unfortunately, this was 2020. This was June of 2020, which was a explosion of cases unlike we have ever seen at Fire in our entire lives. Much worse than anything you're seeing on campus now in terms of professors and students getting in trouble. And it was all ideological. I thought my friend Mike would be fine because he always seemed so confident. So he got a severance package, which also put him in a better position than some of these professors. So I was too busy. So I didn't check in on him until mid-July of 2020. And he was having a real hard time. And he killed himself the next week.
Oh, God.
And people were still coming to his house. People were still calling him on the phone. He was still a target of the cancelers, even though they'd won. They really wanted him gone.
It's unforgivable. Just to remind the audience, you can read that story and many others in Greg's latest book, The Canceling of the American Mind. He wrote The Coddling of the American Mind, which is a huge bestseller. Everyone loved it, learned a lot. And now this is The Canceling of the American Mind, talking about cancel culture. All right, so let's turn the page and talk about where it gets sticky now, at least for me. Because as you know, and I know I'm cited in a few places in your book, I am very anti-cancel culture, or I have been very anti-cancel culture.
You got it from both sides. We're actually almost like proud of you for that you got canceled by the left and
yeah. I did. I've had both sides come after me. It's a badge of honor.
Yeah.
But I've said, even before this whole thing with Israel, I'm not opposed to seeing it used against the people who push it the most, just because the left hasn't learned its lesson. We tried for so long to take the high road. They didn't accept our peace offering of we're going to try to take the high road and talk you out of this nonsense. They just kept canceling us at every turn. So then I got more in the place of, you got to fight fire with fire, to steal your organization's term. Let's start canceling people's asses. And maybe then they'll have some skin in this game and stop behaving like these morons that they are. Well, that hasn't really been working either. So I don't really have the answer. I just know I hate cancel culture. But then here came the Israel thing. And I actually do support what's happening with some of these students, not all of them, but I 100%, for example, Winston and Strawn revoking the offer of Rhino Workman, this young woman at NYU Law who spearheaded the letter blaming the entire terrorist attack on Israel, and absolutely no empathy for any of the victims. And then she was caught on camera ripping down the hostage posters. And Winston and Strawn said, you, Rhina, are not for us. No problem. She wasn't deprived of her right to speak. She's still speaking every day, from what I can tell. But I support the outing of these people. She put her own name on it. She wasn't doxxed. She wants to use that term, but she wasn't doxxed. She signed the letter on behalf of her group, and she keeps going on camera. And so I don't really view it as cancel culture, Greg. I view that as, you know what? You put yourself out there. Cancel culture was never a statement that we have zero principles in this country, that you can put on a KKK hood and go march in the streets saying, I hate black people, and that every employer still has to employ you. Otherwise, it's cancel culture. No, right. There's always going to be bounds of morality and just civility and humanity that we play within. And so for me, I make a distinction between the people who couldn't condemn the Hamas terror attack and blamed entirely the victims who were being murdered and defended the murder and slaughter of babies, and the people who now just say, I'm on the side of Palestine. It's a long struggle. I think Israel's more of an oppressor, but I fully condemn the way Hamas attacked them on October 7th. I think there's a difference between those two, but the former group, I'm all for not hiring them and outing them. What do you make of it?
So our definition, and I'm glad I have an opportunity to kind of explain that actually our definition of cancel culture introduces more nuance than currently people seem to be getting. So our definition of cancel culture is the uptick of campaigns to get people fired, deplatformed, et cetera, or otherwise punished, starting around 2014 and accelerating after 2017. For what would otherwise be First Amendment protected speech. And we say this in the appendix because we don't want to bog the whole thing down. But what we're getting at is as an analog to public employee law, basically saying if it couldn't get you fired as a public employee, because there are protections for the private right of citizens to speak as public employees, then we count that as cancel culture. Usually the cases are pretty easy. And so, for example, as far as, an example that we do think is cancel culture, like unequivocally, is the professor who lost his job at a journal for retweeting something that was a kind of a snarky Onion headline talking about, being critical of killing Palestinian kids. And even though they argued that there were other reasons why it was fired, if the straw that broke the camel's back was merely expression or retweeting, an Onion headline, we count that as cancel culture. When you get to the situation of, people ripping down posters and that kind of stuff, that's not protected speech. And if I saw that as an employer, I'd be like, wow, I'm not sure I can hire somebody because that's mob censorship. Like, I'm not sure I want that person. If you get to the situation where you're just talking about someone's expression of opinion, but like you pointed out, when you do the analog to public employee law, one thing that is kind of consistent is if people become aware of the fact that the person they're hiring might be a raging racist or anti-Semite, then actually the laws exist in case law. They actually say, no, actually that's a situation where you can get rid of somebody. And I think that in a lot of these cases, you're talking about, trying to work at firms that might actually even have Israeli clients. So we take it on a case-by-case basis, but we do work a lot of nuance into our definition by incorporating public employee law.
I think that's very fair. That's very fair because I realize, it's potentially dangerous ground to say, yes, these outrageous students who are on these campuses calling for one solution and actually saying things like, kill the Jews, get rid of Israel. I mean, I realize condemning that and saying those people should be canceled could potentially open up the door to them saying, well, the same thing with Black Lives Matter. They feel their lives are in danger when you say the United States is not a white supremacist country. They don't think you could be sitting next to them at a keyboard because you're dangerous in the same way that you're saying these Palestinian supporters are dangerous to Jewish students. And I just think, no, there's a clear distinction between openly supporting terrorism against Jews and then saying you can come to a corporation that hires Jews as every corporation must, otherwise they're going to be in big legal trouble, and saying, I have a political opinion or a cultural opinion that you may find offensive, that no one could legitimately argue endangers anyone.
And 2 points of clarification that I really want to make, because I forget to make this point all the time because I take it so much for granted. I'm a First Amendment lawyer, but I also argue for a culture of free speech. And we talk a lot about a culture of free speech. I absolutely support freedom of association for private companies, for any association. And that means you absolutely have the legal right to hire who you want and to fire who you want. The only thing we're trying to do is to get people to think about what the world was starting to look like in, say, 2020 and 2021, where it seemed like every investment firm was also a company that had a political identity too, and that you could get fired for basically disagreeing with the opinions of the boss, or worse, the HR department or the young employees. And that really seemed to be where we were headed in 2021. And so all we're arguing for is a thumb on the scale for everyone's entitled to their opinion. Is that going to be enough to prevent someone from, getting fired for retweeting a joke? Hopefully. Is it going to be enough for someone who's, shouts intifada and wants to go work for Goldman Sachs? Probably not.
Right, because you think about this guy who was at Cornell, who was on camera, this professor saying when he saw Hamas conduct the terror attack on October 7th, that it was exhilarating, it was exciting. And then you're asking yourself as a Cornell administrator, can I really send this guy back into the classroom and have Jewish students feel comfortable? I mean, truly, that word safe space is totally overused, and you get the gag reflex on it now. But I genuinely can see how a Jewish student would not feel safe sitting in the classroom of a man who said it was exhilarating to watch Hamas kill all those innocent Israelis. Like, I can see it for real. That guy has to be gone.
It's about as unsympathetic as I've seen in my career.
Right.
I think that if they were to, look into whether or not this person's actually been engaging in discriminatory harassment, that wouldn't shock me. I will say that if that's all he did, it's protected and fire. Absolutely. We defend even highly offensive speech. That being said, I've been seeing some extra highly offensive speech in the recent past. But take a look at what's happening with Amy Wax at Penn, for example. That was a case where, some of the controversial stuff she said about affirmative action led
she's against
the
it.
University. Yeah,
she said something like she said. Is she the one who said something like blacks continue to be at the bottom of the class, and I think it's as a result of affirmative action?
Yeah. She said that, I think, on the Glenn Lowry show, and that was one of the main arguments. But she's always been against affirmative action. This has been.
So is he.
Yeah. Well, totally, and that's been a longstanding position. And students argued that black students argued that they didn't want to have to take a mandatory class with her. Now, if they try to fire Amy Wax, you bet that is a fire case, and we're gonna fight in that case. The decision to say that to no longer make her class mandatory, we're like, okay, that might be more kind of like something that would be hard to argue against. But in terms of the double standard, though, like the fact that they, I mean, you would think that students being like, oh yeah, the Hamas attacks were exhilarating, would basically be getting rid of forever the idea that these are, super sensitive people who care about microaggressions. That all makes that look like a big fat lie. But meanwhile, out in California, you had, I think, hundreds of professors sign a letter demanding that the university not refer to the Hamas atrocities as terrorism, because it might make pro-Palestinian students feel unsafe. And I'm like, how can you still believe this stuff? It's been shown to be completely untrue in other contexts, but none of this seems to get through somehow.
I'm just pulling up this Columbia news. So the Columbia faculty is at war, which I take as a good sign, because I thought they'd all be on one side. The fact that there are any who are pushing back on the radical leftism is a plus. So the headline from the Daily Mail is Columbia faculty is at war over anti-Semitism. Hundreds of professors signed new letter slamming appalling colleagues who defended students for supporting Hamas. So in other words, there were, I think, 100 who signed a letter that was pro-Palestinian / Hamas. 300 signed a letter calling out those professors. But the original letter really is so outrageous. The original letter from those 100 staff at Columbia speaking out in support of the pro-Palestine students. Okay, This is dated October 30th. They refer to what Hamas did on October 7th as a right. And that was Hamas exercising its, quote, right to resist occupation. That it was mere military action. Okay, the murder of children, the torture of children, mere military action. It was just, they needed to recontextualize the way this was being covered as, quote, just a salvo, just one salvo, I'm quoting here, in an ongoing war between an occupying state and the people it occupies, and goes on. I mean, this is the mentality that you've been dealing with. Like, the people behind a letter like that, right, are the ones who see injustice everywhere except when we have dead Israelis.
Yeah, I've reached a point, particularly we spent a lot of canceling of the American mind talking about potential solutions, and I've gotten increasingly sort of radical in kind of what I suggest. And I think one of the best things that could happen for American higher ed is if donors are like, listen, I don't care if you can reform if you want. I don't care right now. We're giving all of our money to University of Texas at Austin. We're and fires campus free speech rankings to make sure that we know what the good schools are, for example. We're pulling our kids out. We're going to smaller state schools. I think the time is now to really realize that I wrote something in Substack today talking about how if this isn't enough to show us that something is really wrong in higher education, that the groupthink has just gone way too far, and the cancel culture has led people to believe that some of these monstrous beliefs are perfectly acceptable. When university presidents are afraid to condemn the Hamas attacks, even though they are some of these presidents are very pro-Israel themselves, that's cancel culture. And I think we should be thinking big in terms of, both bigger and smaller solutions for better ways to show who the best and brightest are, other than these gigantic, over-bureaucratized mega corporations.
Mm-hmm. Just again, to remind everybody, because I want them to buy this book, The Canceling of the American Mind. Cancel culture undermines trust and threatens us all. But there is a solution, by Greg Lukianoff and our old pal Ricky Schlatt, who helped him with it. So you say there is a solution. Is this what it is? Is it dollars and cents? Is it, what we're seeing now among some big donors at the universities? Not only are you not getting my money, but I'm giving my money to this to this college or this organization.
Make sure they know that. Make sure the university knows that you're giving your money, or send them $1, and say, hey, I know you gave you $300 million before, but now I'm giving you $1 and taking my money elsewhere until you figure out what on earth you're doing there. That's part of the solution. But in the book, we talk about solutions for parents, for corporations, for K through 12, and for higher education. And there we're talking about experiment big.
What do you mean?
Like I said, like University of Texas at Austin, this upstart liberal arts college that Pano Canales and Joe Lonsdale are doing. That's great. We don't need just one of those. We need 100 of those. We need ways to, I even talk about figuring out some insanely difficult exam that would allow you to test out of a bachelor's. Because right now, Harvard is not really promising you the best and brightest. They're promising you someone who might be like the kid of a legacy, and everyone gets a 3.8. I mean, the average grade point average at Harvard right now is a 3.8. And you might be ending up hiring a canceller, someone who shows up and is like, this whole company has to be pro-Hamas. And by the way, that genius IT guy who seems to be mildly pro-Trump, that guy's got to go too. And so right now they're delivering a product that is increasingly problematic. And I think that there's better ways, cheaper ways, more rigorous ways to show who actually your best employees are going to be.
Are there any schools left? I think about it a lot, Greg, because I have, my eldest is now 14. He'll be in high school next year. Is there any school left for somebody who's very bright? He has a beautiful mind, and I would love to see it nurtured in the way it used to be when, back in our day when we went to school. But I would never send him to one of these universities. Is there anything out there?
University of Virginia has been doing a good job. They finished in our top 10. University of Chicago has been doing a good job. None of them are perfect, but I think the future in a lot of ways lies in some of these new experiments. For more conservative students, Hillsdale, does well in terms of other schools, on our ranking. So there is hope.
University of Florida?
Yeah, actually, University of Florida, I actually think does pretty well. I always get Florida State and the University of Florida confused, though.
Yeah.
One does really well. And
I didn't even realize Ben
so.
Sass had left the Senate and was running it now until he put out his great statement. I was like, oh, I got to pay more attention. I love that you are such a warrior on this. I like you've done a lot of good. I know you don't win all the battles, but you get involved and you fight them, and that's what it's all about in today's day and age. Greg and Ricky together writing The Canceling of the American Mind. Get it now. The Canceling of the American Mind. Cancel culture undermines trust and threatens us all. But there is a solution. And just so you know, Greg's book, it was such a talker. Everybody had read it. It was like you couldn't go to a cocktail party or whatever without somebody mentioning that book to you. So you will be ahead of the curve if you get this book now. And you'll be the one regaling your friends with stories about this and showing how smart you are. Greg, all the best to you, and to Ricky too.
Thank you so much.
All right, we'll see you soon. And before we go, I want to tell you that tomorrow we're going to be back. I almost had to take the day off tomorrow, and I was like, I can't. I got to be there. Because you know who we have tomorrow? Somebody I absolutely adore. Adam Carolla back on the show. Cannot wait. Hope you'll join us.